Well, hey, let's get going here. It's a little after 9:30 Mountain, and excited to have another great presenter with us again. Again, my name is Matt Borud from the Idaho Tourism, Idaho Commerce side of things, and we're happy to have everybody join us again for what is the fourth, I believe, installment in our webinar series about the changes to the digital landscape with the with cookies here coming up in the next well, certainly what's happened over the last few years, and then more big changes ahead. And so want to again welcome everyone. Please do your best to keep yourself muted. We'll be watching on our end as well, but certainly any questions that folks have, use the chat function, or you know, we can unmute you to ask specifically if you have any other questions. Certainly want to have that engagement, and certainly as we've kind of moved through these, hopefully folks are getting a little better understanding of what these changes are. I mean, this is pretty in the weeds, it is pretty nerdy, it's pretty fun. So hopefully folks are, if there are more questions that are, you know, that as we're reading and learning and listening more, you know, please ask those questions. I know Hannah's going to have several, I'm going to have several, but again, hopefully folks are finding this valuable, and we've got opportunity to ask even what may seem like a dumb question. Like, throw it out there, chat it to me, I'll ask it. Like, you know, we want to cover as much ground as we can here. So I'm going to hand it over to Hannah to introduce our speaker today. But again, thanks everybody for joining, and looking forward to another great session here.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. We've made it to Thursday, which means we are a day closer to Friday, which is awesome. So as Matt said, if this is your first time hopping on our webinar series, welcome. We're really excited to have you. We have been really deep in the weeds, like Matt said, discussing all the different changes around privacy and the depreciation of third-party cookies, and just kind of giving some tips and awareness around what we can do to prepare for all of these changes in the digital landscape. So today we have David Chastain, and he is the Vice President of Tourism at Epsilon, and he has 10 years of experience helping brands across many industries, but he currently specializes in travel and tourism industry. So I've known David for a couple of years now, and he really is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to best practices around marketing and data privacy, and he's going to explain how we can leverage our first-party data and a few tips to better personalize your content. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, David.
Wonderful. You know, thanks so much, Matt and Hannah, for having me on the call this morning. I actually thought I was the first one, so I'm a little disappointed. No, I'm just kidding. But it's great to be here and to share, you know, a little what we do here at Epsilon for not just the travel vertical, but also, you know, for other brands in retail, CPG, automotive. And I think as we think about, you know, what has changed, some of these changes that are happening now in the travel and tourism industry are old news from some other established verticals, right? You know, retail's already had to overcome this. So for a lot of what we're talking about today, it's not about, you know, what's coming, but what's happened, how has it already been solved, and what are some of those applications we can then take forward as marketers as we think about the years to come. So I'm going to attempt to share a screen. So if you see something you shouldn't see, you know, I apologize. Let's see if this works. You know, doing this for a long time, I still get nervous every time I do it. So I'm glad it's paying off. So we should be seeing the first slide with a nice little family walking through the woods. But when it comes to identity, cookies, you know, all this nomenclature being thrown around so much, at the end of the day, as any type of marketer, our job is to reach a person. Fundamentally, whether we're any type of media we're buying, whether it's print, email, you know, digital, anything it is, it's all about how do we reach a consumer to drive an outcome. It's marketing 101. So you think about, you know, the changes that are happening, we can't lose sight of the fact there's some fundamental marketing beliefs. People buy things, not cookies, not devices, not robots. Frequency drives actions. I mean, as the more we reach the right person, as long as we target the right people, we will drive more outcomes we need, whether it's a hotel booking, a car rental, you know, folks coming to the state of Idaho. You know, all those pieces tie together. So, you know, those are still fundamental table stakes, and they always have been. Now, the ability to really enact that has changed since about 2017. As your walled gardens, you know, you have the Googs and the books, continue to get the walls higher and higher to, you know, to try to honestly drive more and more advertising dollars that way. So, as we dig into this, I'm going to share a little about who we are, and then we can, go forward into what it is that we do and how our approach to identity and some of the things happening in the space. So first, Epsilon is actually an old company. We're relatively new for a travel and tourism focus. Epsilon itself is 35 years old. Where I work in the digital media solutions division, we used to be called a company called ValueClick. So we were actually founded in 1998 and was the OGs of digital advertising. Back when you might have heard some great brands like AOL, you got a little disc in the mail. So we actually owned the patents for cost per click advertising. So, the world's changed a lot more from clicks to we're actually trying to drive sales and outcomes of other things. But, when it came to ad networks, we were one of the first. We actually went public the day the dot-com bubble burst, 98. We were then, a couple companies came together in 2011 to create Conversant, which is what when we entered the tourism space, everybody knew us as Conversant. That was about 5 companies that came together to create true people-based marketing. You take the scale of advertising programmatic relationships tied to who someone actually is to work with companies like Walgreens to understand if we serve someone an ad, here is the actual SKU level data they purchase in store or online. How do we get those customers to spend more a week than the baseline? And then we were acquired by Epsilon, and we changed our name during the pandemic because we had nothing else to do to really make sure we're all merged underneath the Epsilon brand. So what Epsilon really brings to the table, and as one company now, is the ability for a brand to look at their DMP, the way they deal with their PII and their non-PII to enact action. So from managing audience profiles to building, to buying email databases, to doing really, intensive clean room exercises, it all ties together. So what we sit in and where we help with our travel and tourism brands is the ability to take that publisher depth and breadth and tie it to identity. A lot of folks are focusing really heavily on the identity piece. Cookies have been a cheap and easy way to identify people cross-site, cross-platform for a very long time. But moving forward, you cannot have a strong identity solution without also having very strong publisher relationships. And that's where I think you're starting to seeing a lot of organizations and a lot of people you talk to start to really come apart, and go to different, camps in the next few years. Publisher relationships already deal in first-party data. They already deal in that non-PII environment. And as we dig a little deeper, companies that have publisher relationships like us, like Google, or people who actually own their own media, like Facebook and some of these direct brands, are really coming to the top of the tier in terms of how do they continue to prop themselves up against this deprecation. So for us, we're one of the largest ad platforms in the world. We serve across millions of websites, millions of mobile apps. We love serving ads in iOS environments. We'll talk about that here pretty soon. As the rest of the industry has backed away from it, we've doubled down because no one else is buying inventory. And that's where 65% of your mobile audience is right now. And then in the day, it's about how do we reach real people? So one of the things to talk about too, when you're talking about identity and all these nuances, I understand at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you call it if you don't know who that person is on the other side. As an individual, not just a segment, because any given day I'm wearing my dad hat, I'm wearing my household income hat, my travel and Tinder hat. I'm not 3 different people. I'm one person that's navigating the world and wanting to interact with brands. So, as we move forward, what we bring to travel and tourism and what we want you to think about today is how we interact with businesses to grow it and create these outcomes. Whether we're booking something, doing tours, car rentals, visitors to a state or a DMO, this is how it can all be built up as a business to acquire net new visitors, retain our existing customers, and ultimately grow our share of wallet. So when we say people, the way that we define it here at Epsilon is there is no PII. So that's a big difference between the way that we go to market. And one of the reasons that we've been pretty immune to GDPR and CCPA issues is because we never have any client personally identifiable information into our walls. So everything we do is double blinded. So what we have created is a core ID. It's an identifier that anonymously takes who someone is based on first party pixel integration. And we're digging a little deeper to see where they are, where they browse, what they read, how they connect, how they shop, but it's all anonymized. So when we work with our clients like Marriott might be sending over a Bonvoy file to reach the target and the message, but John Smith never enters our walls. So in this age of privacy compliance, you start looking at and you're vetting as people continue to vet partners in the space and what people do. What happened in recent news out of Europe now, where the opt-in pop-up is now considered you shouldn't be doing that. People that are dealing in that space are having more and more things to deal with. So that's how we base it. So it's all about reaching millions of people, who they actually are, and we're going to dig into a little deeper about some of the nuances coming up. But when you think about the way we go to market, some will sound a bit biased because we do things differently. But we are set up right now to where our global identity now powers Adobe, it powers the Trade Desk, and there is an alternative to the Googles of the world, especially when you're looking at a free internet and a more open spots to be in. So at the end of the day, look for things, how you can match it all together. So how do you see someone? How do you serve people, individual profiles? How do media relationships use this information to drive personalized conversations over a long period of time? Understand who to decision, how to optimize, and ultimately, what do we do? So our fundamental beliefs at the end are we should be speaking to people. We should understand what it is we're doing, how we're marketing it, and ultimately hold ourselves to a goal and an outcome. So let's dig into the weeds. So one of the things to really keep in mind is I don't want folks to get confused about what's happening in the world. Third-party cookies are being deprecated, they are going away. First-party cookies are not. First-party pixels and integration, and people are doubling down. That's why you're seeing so many of your programmatic vendors in the space scrambling to get direct publish relationships kind of last minute. You're seeing some of your pretty large publishers kicking off the way they sell their programmatic advertising to their folks, right? They're no longer allowing it to be on open exchanges. So we're going to talk about, how you identify people. So third-party identifiers are actually a lot of different things. So, one of the sources is going to be third-party cookies. It's a tracking cookie on a browser. The big challenge that's had with these, and I'm sure your previous 3 sessions have talked some about this, is it's really browser specific. So 90% of the time you're on your mobile phone, you're in some sort of app. You're not on your Safari browser. But guess what? If you are on your Safari browser since 2017, you still couldn't place third-party cookies. So what a lot of advertisers in the space have done, if you look at Google Analytics and look at some of the ways that you're looking at your mobile web traffic, is they've quietly turned off iOS delivery to really favor Google, right? To really kind of double down that Android traffic. There's mobile IDs. So you have a third-party cookie in a browser, a desktop setting or a browser setting on your phone. They have mobile identifiers. So you have unique device IDs. And this can be used for advertising. They can be used for location tracking. There's a lot of things that those device IDs do. If you have an email address, typically it's anonymized unless you're like first name dot last name, then it's not. And then IP address. And I think IP address has actually opened up a can of worms, especially for travel marketers in terms of how we define feeder markets. For a long time, people would serve media into a market saying, look, I want to target folks from Denver to come to our state. If we're just serving ads to IP addresses that show up in Denver, I live in Atlanta. If I'm logged into my hotel Wi-Fi in Denver, I could get served an ad based on IP address. When the reality is, if you wanted to target me, it should be based on residential information, shipping address, billing address, things like that. So we'll unpack that a bit more, but be thinking about, there's really practical applications, and there's ways that, this has already been impacting some of the folks on this phone. So timeline. This is not new. This has been greatly publicized because Google decided to make it a very public thing. Right? People are trying to continue to gain market share. But Apple's already done this. So since 2017, so we're talking, not great at math, but 5 years ago, this has been done. So Apple is very, very vocal about what they did. So your Safari browsers already have not supported third-party cookies in a very long time. In 2019, so 3 years ago, Firefox got rid of them. iOS now is starting to limit the use of device IDs. So the other piece, not just the cookies, but also the devices on what they're passing back to their apps and their advertisers. And in 2022, though this has moved a few times, but Chrome will remove it. And then essentially a lot of what certain industries relied on in terms of they don't have their own robust first-party data, they don't have a lot of activated their first-party data, might be in trouble. The things that aren't changing, like for your companies that have lists of past customers, you can still activate and use those. Things you have opted into are still very important. So for folks on the phone and your friends and family to talk about all the great stuff about cookies in your cocktail parties, can start talking about how we need to continue to build our own databases, our own DMPs to make sure we're owning as much data as we possibly can. But what's going to be affected by this? So reach, and you're already seeing reach take a dramatic drop off. Without the ability to really forecast that reach number, you're not going to understand the frequency we needed, how we're going to drive those actions. Third-party cookies for about 90% of the digital companies in the space are what they rely on for personalization. Knowing how to serve an ad in a market with a different overlay, different price point is really dependent upon these third-party cookies. Campaign management, so things like A/B testing, frequency capping are going to be really challenging with these going away. And then performance measurement. We work closely with Matt and other folks is changing KPIs from some traditional clicks and views like that to more outcome driven KPIs. But if you're basic Google Analytics type measurement, you're going to be looking at how do we look at our KPIs and adjust moving forward. So what is first-party data? So I'm going to talk about a little bit how first-party data works and why first-party cookies are not going away, and they're still very, very important. So I don't want to talk about doom and gloom without, hey, there's something out here that's usable, we can do it now. So first-party cookies can use to identify individuals, but it still needs to be connected to make it useful. So the way it typically works is someone goes to the brand website. This is Liz. She provides the brand her email address. That's her PII. She logs in. She wants to interact with Wayfair.com. She puts her email address in, shipping address. Wayfair knows who she is. She goes to a publisher, right? She goes to a publisher site and she wants to also log in. So she's now on TripAdvisor, someone else, and she logs in with an email address. Connecting those pieces is going to be really important. And with first-party data, that's still doable. So where they've typically relied on third-party cookies without having to have these pipes connect, with first-party cookies, it'd be really important to make sure these pipes connect and move forward. What we do a little differently is we have that direct relationship with these publishers. So it all links back to a core ID. And one of the things Hannah asked is like, what's the future? What's changing? We were one of the first. We will not be the last. There's already companies that are trying to create their own core identity solution. The Trade Desk has done it. Adobe's done it. They're now using us to help backbone some of that. But if you can connect through identity providers, the brand and publishers together in a PI-free environment, then you can still have that personalization, that ability to reach people, to change messaging, and you're immune to everything that's going on. So, as you look, I think what the future is more companies that will continue to kind of house both of those relationships. And that's what Google has the same thing, some of that stuff, and then be able to personalize it and be able to measure that stuff with online and offline. So we know programmatic is important. So the approach is to keep that identity-based solution. And as this thing happens, there will continue to be companies that are emerged to do it. I mean, it hasn't been happening in a vacuum. I think a lot of things are just easy, but a lot of companies are already preparing for a way to figure out how we're going to do it moving forward. And I think for the ones that have been emerging as leaders in this space, they've already gotten it figured out. Apple, Google, Facebook, everybody's a for-profit company. What this does is a way to help keep more of that insulated, dollars in house. You're more and more married, which is fine. It's good products, good solutions. But as we look at the identity, the more as people on this phone can create their own DMPs, have access to their own first-party data, you'll also make yourself more and more immune to these things as well as you activate it. So when you put it all together, and the reason I kind of do it in the backdrop of what we do is it's a little bit of a unique approach because we are not reliant on a live ramp as a connector. So right now, a lot of companies will take this data, they'll have a file of 1 million records, they'll pass it to a match tool that has an identity, they'll match that, there'll be diminishing returns, and they go back out there and try to find the right people to message. What you'll start seeing continue to emerge is there's still going to be access to first-party data via publishers and your own data. Using companies that have the ability to create that identity and leverage some sort of, whether it's a core ID, some sort of ID across all of it, that's going to be scalable. And I think there's a lot of benefits. Everybody kind of, I think, focuses on some of the negative headaches when it comes to this degradation. But the benefits moving forward now is you'll be able to have long-term conversations with consumers. So right now, it's the nature of third-party cookies is every 30 days is gone for the most part. Once you have first-party data coupled with identifiers, that doesn't drop off after 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. So it allows travel brands and marketers to start having an ongoing, persistent conversation with folks as they jockey for, selling them a particular piece of time in the future. That's the great part of this industry is we're selling someone on something that, hey, this is going to come. You want to do this 6 months from now. You want to do this 3 months from now. Set the time aside now. With the way the industry is changing and third-party cookies are going away, you'll be able to have that conversation and see those outcomes months in the future, which I think is going to be really, really big advantage. So I'm also going to get in the weeds about identity resolution. I'm hoping you have not seen it broken out this way yet. I was trying to do something to be kind of new and exciting, the best you can, talking about identity at 9:30 in the morning Mountain Time, but I'm doing the best I can. In digital marketing for the last 20 years, probabilistic has been the main way advertisers talk to people. And it's really based on a guess. And it's based on IP address. We've already talked about IP address has some flaws. So what this works is an advertiser will look at your household IP address and assume you're all the same person. And they will serve you ads based on the fact you have the same IP address. What has been very problematic during a global pandemic, as we're all working on VPNs, is right now, though I'm based in Atlanta, my IP address is bouncing off of something in Chicago. I get Chicago ads all the time based on my VPN. Probabilistic is a problem. Deterministic is the better way, and that's where LiveRamp, Google, a lot of these, Facebook, anybody that has some publishers and the ability to take emails and match it and name, that's where they live in. It's much stronger match rate, much stronger reach rate, and it's determinized. So we're going to say this email was logged into this desktop computer. We know it aligns to this name. How's everyone message it? Hybrid is where a lot of your companies like Newstar, some other folks kind of live. They take IP address and email. Scale changes, so probabilistic might have a ton of scale but really low accuracy. Deterministic might have less scale but higher accuracy. What we do is a little bit different is when you think about, again, who that person is, all three of these, you still don't necessarily know what they're doing, how they're interacting, how they're engaging. You're just matching devices. You're taking an iPhone, saying this iPhone belongs to this Android. It's the same thing. We verify it based off of purchases. So when we look at matching devices, again, all anonymized, client data never enters our walls. We work with a sister company that will take first name, last name, email, and match it to our anonymized core IDs so we can have scale. But it's all verified by a purchase, right? Robots don't really buy things, people do. So when we're talking about these profiles, we're matching devices, we're seeing, it's anonymized first name, last name, shipping address, billing address, but tied to this anonymized person we saw bought balloons at Party City, right? We're seeing that type of transactions over and over again. A little bit different. And then, so our approach, when you look at name and address data, so we will use both address and email anonymized for our core IDs. We find address is a lot stickier in terms of you have one address. Typically, you might have 5 emails, and all those emails are different as well. But my Gmail persona is different than my Yahoo persona. It's only tied to my fantasy sports accounts, which is different than that old creepy Hotmail account left over from my MySpace days that's floating out there in the universe I lost my login to, right? But it's all out there, it's still there. So trying to figure out, just email alone isn't great. So we, and our approach is different in this space, is we reconcile all that. So all your emails, all your addresses, all your purchases, again, anonymized. When I say you, I don't know it's Hannah. Hannah is user 34501. Actually, I should have changed that picture to put Hannah there, but I didn't. But it allows you to look at things differently. And then you can see that online and offline identity, which I think is very, very important for especially the tourism sector, and for companies that may not have a cash register. So, if you have a cash register, if you're able to capture that you have access to first-party data. If you don't, oftentimes, how are we going to measure those pieces and what happens, post-action? So this allows you to see both with online and offline purchases. So you take anonymized name and address, phone numbers, emails, cookies, device IDs, connected TV IDs, all tied to a single individual. So when Hannah's like, well, let's talk about kind of what the future looks like. We've been doing this now since 2011, trying to base identity. We felt kind of like Chicken Little for a while, saying the sky's falling, the sky's falling, the sky's falling. Thankfully, it did at one point, so we were ready for it. But we're here now, we're established, and more companies do the same thing. So we're a little bit ahead of the game, but you're seeing other companies come forward with the way to look at identity and approach it. But I would caution, I think we are, as marketers, probably thinking too hard on the identity piece and less on what's the outcome this allows us to have. To me, it's great to say these devices are connected, but if you still don't know who that person is, how they browse, how they shop, how they interact, you just know the devices are connected. You don't know anything about that person. So, and again, to get really in the weeds, online purchase, we onboard data, we see offline purchases, your app login information, all anonymized to a hashed ID. And hashed IDs are the way of the future, the way they're going to work. If you have existing data, you can match your data to hashed IDs that are out there that are available. I think there is going to be a big push to we need to build our own DMPs. But I also think the reality is in this new world, having startups and other companies build this from scratch is going to get much more cost prohibitive. You're going to have, I think, a lot less players that have stuff that's already set up. I think you're going to see a lot more folks starting to outsource this stuff as well. So I think you're looking at what's my additional costs of the future is finding, companies that have things like this established know that we're going to have to do this because, building their own relationships, building their own publishers, creating their own identity match rates is just going to be cost prohibitive for a lot of startups moving forward. So you'll see, I've been in this industry for a long time. There's waves of, you have a couple of really big players. You have waves of now we're completely fragmented. This is going to create the wave to the way you're going to start having probably less fragmentation in the space moving forward. So, but it's a good thing. So with this, you can have, online and offline can work together. You can take your name-based and your ID-based solutions and really understand a lot of pieces around your customers and your visitors moving forward, down to where they buy, what they shop, their browsing habits, who they're related to. It's all going to be actionable moving forward. So I mentioned, it's great we matched all these people together, but we still want to target the right person for media campaigns. So, understanding who someone is, with third-party cookies going away, you shouldn't be limited to being able to target people based on who they are, who your graphic information is, what they're buying, what they watch, how they connect, where they go, what they browse. Data sources might change, but I think fundamentally strategies, you need to be aware of the changes, but there's companies and solutions out there that are prepared to make sure you're okay moving forward. And for personalization. So I actually presented a slide the other day, and they didn't know who these people were. I was a Full House fan growing up, and I'm hoping it's still relevant. This is Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen. They are fashion and tech moguls. They happen to be twins. It's not the same person, so spoiler alert, but I didn't think I'd explain this until I threw this up on the slide. I just got a bunch of blank stares. So I hope we got table stakes here. But regardless, they're twins. But they're different people. Not all people are the same. So if you're looking at traditional forms of third-party audience advertising, you will treat this person the exact same. She's female, she's 30, she likes a leisure, she has a house income of $60K, and she lives in Atlanta. Is not the same person. I am not the same, 30 to 40-year-old person that lives in Atlanta too. We're all different, we all shop differently, we all browse differently. So you should go personalize creative that way to those individuals. So as you think about, we work with a lot of hotel brands, and one of the things that we found really fascinating during the early stages of things starting to reopen is, even though like in the Southeast, demand was huge, and especially some more rural areas, right? So we're coming out of COVID, things are opening up. People are fleeing the cities to go out to some sort of rural area or a beach town or a mountain town to get away. Meanwhile, we found a lot of hotels was like, let's offer discounts. We're going to offer discounts. We have to get a discount out there. Demand was high, ADR is going up, but discounts were still flowing. With the ability to understand who someone is able to personalize, you understand who's incentivized by a discount ad, who's incentivized by just the leisure ad of the experience. As we come out of a pandemic and we have to figure out how do we make up for profit, get things back close to where they can be. Understanding who a full price shopper is, understand this person really responds to restaurant ads versus family travel ads, understanding how people like to fly, understand their preferred airlines, understanding their loyalty programs. That's really impactful information that a first party world allows you access to help personalize and decision creative, because no one person is created the same. And I think, as we moving forward, it's even more important to understand people's proclivities now and in the future to make sure we're messaging them correctly. So these are all real ways we personalize. We don't understand how someone is based on how they spend, what they review, what they browse. And I think, even though there is some scary times for, as we look at changing marketing plans based on cookie deprecation, what it's going to allow us to do is run better campaigns. Everybody will get smarter, everybody will get better. And I think you're organically have to start holding ourselves to tougher outcomes as well. I think goals will get tighter. I think, some of the ambiguous, hey, we drove this awareness, some of that will still be measured different ways, but you will now have the tools and the ability to give tough answers, show strong results as we move forward. And then finally, how does it happen? Why is it important? Marketing effectiveness is going to get better. I think we're at a point now where, you think about just tourism brands 10 years ago versus now, how much more we know about what we're doing, right? How much the data has changed, the tools that are available. And I think you're going to see a great level setting as well, where small businesses, DMOs, mid-sized companies will now have access to the same things that the biggest brands in the world have been doing now for years, right? And I think that's going to be a big thing moving forward is, the pricing for all these things are going to continue to come down as it becomes more, stabilized and commoditized. I think it's going to be a big incentive for companies now being playing in the same space. So it'll be a really good thing, I think, moving forward for everybody. And it helps you also stay ahead of browser changes and all the different compliances. Privacy compliance, it's starting to get, we're seeing more in the travel space, but we work with global brands, and this is a very, very sensitive topic for them. How do you understand that this person from the EU is on vacation in Georgia and you don't serve them an ad? Because they could get fined. When GDPR first came out, we had cruise line clients just shut their website down. Like, we can't risk an EU fine of 5% of our revenue. It's not going to happen. So that's gotten better. I think that's as companies have really embraced and understand it. The other challenge when you look at these policies that come out, they are very ambiguous, and that's kind of a challenge as well. So our lobbying team was actually pretty involved in helping, go over some of these documents, the CCPA in particular, where we used to be headquartered in California, about let's actually put some firm guardrails around this really ambiguous language. So I think you're also to see some of these policies start to get tightened up as version 1, version 2, version 3 continue to come, because a lot of the language is pretty broad to begin with. So just, again, first relationships will keep you immune to, even as these things tighten up or change, you'll be in a decent spot. I think that concludes the formal presentation. So we are good there. I can stop my share and then y'all can ask questions. I hope this was helpful. I kind of flew kind of fast through it. Like I said, I had 4 cups of coffee, so that's what we get.
Thanks, David. That was awesome. There are a lot of really great content. I have a question. So something that you mentioned about like publisher relationships. And one of the big points that we've been trying to drive home with this series is just how right now it's really important to be collecting your first party data, because that is your data that you own and you can use that for many, many things. But I think something that's interesting is like you mentioned that some other agencies are scrambling to get this first party publisher relationships, because those first party publishers, they have access to their first party data, which is extensive. So do you know anything about how that publisher relationship works, in the sense of, you can't necessarily buy and sell data, but how does an advertising agency get to partner with a publisher so they can actually use that first party data?
That's good, but it's related over time. I mean, we are uniquely poised. We're also an ad network, right? So we programmatically, we help publishers monetize their websites for us. So we pay them to put ads on their sites, and in return we get information. I mean, that's how it works. That's what's in it for them. So you can be a startup app company. I mean, you see those those games you play. You play, what's that new, the Wordle, the Wordy, whatever it is, you're getting served ads, and that's the monetization point of that. I think as we look at other companies like ours, I mean Merkle is another competitor. We have 5,000 relationships, they now have 25, and they're a big company too, trying to get started. I think as an agency, we look at what are the strategic publishers we need to be with and negotiate publisher deals, and that's going to be, I think, part of it too moving forward is that. And I think also, more partnerships to help provide that type of data, because like I said, companies already have a lot of this, and just how can we make sure that they can get all the access and resources that it has as well. And the way publisher relations work for us is, part of your ad agreements, we put first party puts on that publisher website. That publisher then passes back to certain information, but that's not the only piece. The second piece is when we work with, like, we will never take like Lowe's data and say, Home Depot, come use Lowe's data. That's not how it works. But from the point of matching, so we can actually say, all right, if you have a database and you want to take advantage of these core IDs, you're able to then match your database to existing identifiers that are older and have you can see where people are sleeping or staying when they're not with you, and then then extend that to the publishers to be able to see where they are, what they're browsing, engaging with. So I think you're going to see more and more of all size agencies and brands are also trying to strike really specific publisher deals. But now publishers also know their data is very valuable. Where it used to be they were playing in a big space, now they know, well, hey, we got something special here, and it doesn't work without us. So I also anticipate the price and stuff start to go up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was awesome. So kind of on that topic of your like core ID, again, driving home the point that, collecting people's name and email and information about them is really awesome. And then being able to give that to an advertiser can create a lot of different opportunities. So what would it look like if, a brand or company gave you a bunch of emails and their database? How could you use that? And then kind of what does that company get in return by giving you that information to use?
So we would only use, what we do for our company is any type of data is given to us, we only use it for the rights of that company. So, for us, it just helps their campaigns even more. So the way we do it's a little bit different. So we do it all kind of within our walls relationships. So, for example, let's say a client has 500,000 records of their past visitors for the last 10 years, right? It's first name, last name, they have emails. It may not be accurate anymore, right? They can be sending emails to them. They can change addresses. We'd actually do something called data append. We would use some other Epsilon resources to say, let's clean this data up first. So your output's only as good as your input. So I think for a lot of times, let's make sure that data is where we think to be. Let's append the new addresses, make sure it's all accurate. That's then passed to a what we call agility, which is a company that sits outside of our piece of Epsilon's walls, but it takes that first party information and then matches it to our core IDs and tell us what core ID is to target. There isn't any reverse engineering. Like once we see this, I can't tell you this core ID is this email, it goes that way. But what it does do is ensures that when some of the, when some giant companies, they're very, very privacy sensitive, say, you can use our data for us, they're very aware that there's not gonna be any data breaches. It's all like, we never even see it. It's all done in this anonymized world. But you can still measure those outcomes. You can still see those core IDs that buy things, transact things that way. Now, what other companies do, we have the benefit of having all those pieces in one roof. Typically, you'll just use multiple vendors for that type of solution, right? So you'll be having your data stored on an Excel file or in Salesforce or in Adobe or somewhere. You have to use a company to clean it all up. And then you have to use someone like a LiveRamp to take that and match it to some sort of a cookie universe, right? It's still cookies. And then the match rates decline. And that's something you have to think about too, is you have a million records where when we have it all in-house, we'll match it at 80, 85%. So your actual universe is much higher. Digital marketing and passing data is really like a game of telephone. So if we were to start this and if we'd be in real life, remember in kindergarten, you play telephone, someone starts this and always gets screwed up at the end. It's kind of the same way, where that message will change and it'll nuance slightly and the returns will diminish. So typically match rates for an email-based matching tool will be 60% before you even try to put it to a DSP to serve media to them. There's no guarantee that DSP can match to all those people either. So I think what you're going to see now is as more companies start trying to do it more themselves, because they can keep higher match rates and reach more of that universe, because you don't have the third-party cookie backdrop to fall back on for scale. Is that too much? Does that help? Does that make sense?
No, that was great.
I get in the weeds sometimes. I try to throw jokes in. I never know if it hits or doesn't. So I don't know.
On that note, David, I think, as you were commenting earlier, I think you kind of touched on this, and I guess I want to make sure I understood it, because I think from our perspective at the state, we're very much, I think, probably what you just described. We have several 100,000 emails, names from people who have ordered travel guides or signed up for our email lists in the past. And, we're going to have DMOs across our state who are, in a comparable position. They have regional, local travel guides, they have email lists. We've been, there's a, for lack of a better, like a preference center where you can say, I'm interested in hiking and mountain biking and fishing, and I plan to travel North Idaho, and I have a family. And so, we've got all of that, right? But I'm wondering, a couple of things, I guess, as you were describing some of the solutions you've all put together, you've got kind of that first party data element that I think Hannah just asked and you had just described, but we can provide some of that information to you, and that can be utilized in your ad network. But, I think learning a little bit more about like what Google is doing with some of their cohorts, do you all do kind of that cohort element as well? And is there a way you kind of combine those two things? So as our first party data is growing or improving, and we're optimizing for that, and that's a living process, we can plug those things in along with, hey, you have a family's outdoor enthusiast cohort that folks can also target, and we can kind of blend the two into a better campaign. Does that make sense? Is that kind of what you guys do, or is that Is that how we should be thinking about some of this stuff?
So I think it's good to be thinking about these different types of audiences out there. Our approach, because we have, we know this person, is in your database. We also know this person, we matched the core ID. So then you'll know by this ID, this person likes to hike, browse, they love steak, they love craft beer. The benefit of that is that you get all the extra information about the individual that you don't know. Right. So, one of the ways we use this practically is if a hotel chain says, here's my loyal customer base, I'll let you in on a secret. I won't tell you who all I work with, but every hotel probably thinks I'm their best customer. Right. I travel so much for conferences, everything else. I have status with Hilton, with Marriott, with Hyatt, probably still IHG, that then they all send me the email saying, hey, thank you so much for your loyalty. The reality is I'm not loyal to anybody when it comes to that. So I think, these companies will always allow you to see, all right, so what is my share of wallet? And in terms of destinations, what's my share of vacation, right? Who we message, where else are they going? So this will allow you to get all that additional information in cohorts. And I think, even with your data, it allows you to be able to take that and expand it other places. And so you have a seed and take that seed and grow it and model it and make it better. One of the things, the unique things that we do for destinations, which is different, and we do this for restaurants too, and for places that do not really have a ton of first-party transaction information, is we also track about 70% of the anonymized point-of-sale transaction spend in the country. So we'll look at who has spent money in 4 years on this parts of the state. Then you can actually model those people, invite them back, see what they do, and that's first-party integration stuff that we have that's available to be used. You used to say if someone showed you your credit card statement, you could probably tell a lot about them. The same way, how people transact, where they go, what they shop. I mean, people tend to invest and spend money on things they care about most. And I think that's how we look at it too, is you could take your people's files and say, all right, where do these people spend? What do they do? And if you don't have any data, there's also proxies to help build it and make sure you can still market successfully to your customers. And I want to come to Idaho soon. I told Hannah this, so.
You've opted in.
Yeah. I gotta come.
You got it. Yeah, you're in. No, that helps a lot, because I think what you had talked about earlier. I think as we've learned more about this, as you'd said, this isn't necessarily new for a lot of other segments. This is probably more new for those of us in the travel segment. And I think outside of hotels, lodging, restaurants that have point of sale, cash register, purchase data, for us, we don't have that, right? We're, and a lot of DMOs don't as well. And so understanding that there are options, there are just different options for how we can still run targeted, relevant messaging in front of the right people is great. That's what we're going for here. But I would just say, do you have any, as you survey your landscape of tourism clients, do you have recommendations or examples or, things that other groups are doing that are working well in terms of gathering that data or, building a first party data strategy that integrates with some of these other things that have maybe been out there for a while for other groups, but, is going to become more of a reality for us?
They're doubling down their partnerships. Right, they're local businesses that have first party data. They're trying to broker deals to have access to that. Now, it'd be hard to broker deals with Marriott corporate, right? But independent owners, operators, you have local Airbnb, local vacation rental companies. We have seen some of our partnerships go after like really local, locally owned or even corporately owned, but independent hotels, resorts. I think that'd be more of that. But also think too, there's always kind of two ways of the same thing. So one of the things that we've done for some of our DMO clients is, they might have access to the first party data, but we might be able to identify, here is every person we know that has bought an Icon pass in the last 2 years. Let's run a campaign targeting Icon pass holders that have not been to our location yet. Let's tell them we're here, you can come. And I think you're going to see, between that, trying to get those first relationships, but also getting smarter about what we're trying to drive in an outcome. I mean, one of the things that we've run for other DMOs is midweek leisure business. You know, some of our DMOs, you know, especially, you know, around the country, weekends, they've been doing fantastic. You know, Monday through Thursday, things have been less. So, you know, who has spent the night during the week in hotels in certain zip codes? Let's model them, let's invite them back to try to drive the need. So I think, you know, being able to get those partnerships, you know, yourselves, or get partner buy-in. I mean, one of the things that I think one of our clients really well is they want to do a midweek leisure campaign. They also got their hotels who offer a discounted rate during that time. They facilitate the whole thing, and it ended up, it really performed well for them. But I think the partners were to start, you know, continue to get email signups, email lists, you know, get contacts updated. You can also buy lists too. I mean, you can still buy lists of things. I just found that some of that's not as good as it used to be. But I think just lean into not only your partners there, you know, in the destinations, but also partners you can work with, you know, like Madden and others that can do really good work and making sure to do it.
Oh, that's great. That's interesting.
I see a question here too about where's everybody working. I just looked at the chat. So we have about 500 folks in Atlanta, but then we're spread out all across the country. We have offices everywhere. And now that we're remote, we are absolutely everywhere. I mean, I have folks that, I mean, we're in every state, and we're globally too. We have a big hub in the EU, in Australia, other places as well.
Cool. Do we have any other questions? Anyone, any brave souls? Nope.
Oh, this is great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Hannah, I'll send this to you. I was supposed to do it ahead of time, and I didn't do it, so I apologize.
No
I will
worries.
send it to you. You're happy to share this to everybody else that you like. And then, you know, I can be a resource, and we really appreciate everybody's partnerships. We're happy to help. You know, if you have ideas or questions or things you just want to bounce off, we're here.
Appreciate it very much. Well, David, thank you. Hannah, thank you. Yeah, really appreciate it. As Diane had noted, we'll link to these on our website as well. So yeah, David, appreciate your deck, and you know, we'll pass this out for folks as well if they missed today to go back and view. But yeah, this was great. This is really, really great information to kind of just continue to help this education. So if there's no other questions, thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your week and forthcoming weekend, and we'll see you next week. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.